We have a report there in Davos. Adesua Moran. Adesua, glad to have you join me. Last there, I was just talking about Trump touting denuclearization between China, Russia, and himself, and of course saying that if OPEC and Saudi Arabia had brought down the oil, the war would have stopped in between Russia and Ukraine. How is the atmosphere? How was Trump's speech received?
Well, thank you so much, Indy. I can tell you that here in Davos, this is the fullest I've seen the Congress Hall since the beginning of the World Economic Forum 2025. And as you know, wherever Trump goes, he pulls the crowd, either for good or for bad. It's been received with mixed reactions, as you will find anywhere else. There are those who have applauded his speech, and as you've just know, the speech has just ended, so people are trying to process all that he had to say. This was his first major speech to global political and economic leaders since he assumed office some 3-4 days ago. And of course, it was no surprise. Trump himself being a businessman, touting and pitching America as a destination, preferred destination for business, and even subtly threatening manufacturers and businesses. If you do not produce in the US, then you get some sort of tariffs.
Well, interesting, because he's talked about particularly, it's interesting he didn't say anything about, even though it's a business meeting, but he did talk about Ukraine and Russia, but he didn't say anything about, he had to say that his team, which is quite interesting, because this has been ongoing between Egypt, Qatar, and US, led by Biden, that his team negotiated the ceasefire in the Middle East.
He claimed victory for a lot of things, Indy. In the last 3-4 days, he says he has accomplished what others haven't accomplished in years. And he took quite a lot of time in denigrating and dismantling all the policies of his predecessor, former President Joe Biden. Nothing new, really, that Donald Trump had said today. A lot of people expected specifics. For instance, we mentioned the peace deal in Gaza. He hinted that his administration, before taking power, was part of that deal, and some have given him credit to that. But as to the specifics of how he played a role in all of that, he didn't give us that. He also talked about the Russia-Ukraine war, where he called Ukraine a killing field. He said, we know that President Trump and President Putin are expected to have a phone call in the coming days. He says he looks forward to meeting President Putin. And he also touched on global oil prices. He's of the opinion that if he tells OPEC and Saudi Arabia to bring down the prices of oil, it will automatically end the war in Ukraine, because his thinking is that Russia is able to fund the war against Ukraine because it's still able to sell its oil. And he's saying if the prices are brought down, it will affect Russia and then automatically end the war. I'm sure there are people who would disagree with that.
Yeah, many would disagree with many of the things that Trump was saying. For example, emergency has been declared on the southern border concerning immigration, and then on energy, which the total energy span there was speaking about. But then, from what I have, annual encounters at the US-Mexico border under President Trump then averaged 488. Under his predecessor, Obama, it was 408. That was then. And then things about, what he has achieved, like you've mentioned, under 3 days, yes, or like some who hasn't achieved that under 4 years. We'll see how what all the things they talked about, golden age of America, revolution of common sense. We'll see how that plays out with the world, particularly when it comes to tariffs, Canada, Mexico, China. We'll see how that plays out at this one.
Indeed.
All right, thank you so much. The best in Davos, Switzerland. All right, you're still watching Arise News here. That was our correspondent in faraway Switzerland, Davos, on the World Economic Forum, where Trump just held an address. He addressed as his first public outing to the entire world, where he addressed, like I said earlier, 3,000 political leaders, and then, of course, business leaders as well. You saw them asking him questions there, where he talked about the golden age of America, revolution of common sense. He declares GOP as a party of common sense, and so many other things that he reeled out there, that Biden lost it with high inflation and border. There was a mess, according to him, with the border. We'll continue with, very soon, we'll be going to the world. You're still watching Arise News. We will soon be moving into the world. But I have with me here Prof. Ken, if just a word or two on overview of what you made out of Trump's speech there, his first outing to the world. What's your overview of that particular speech of Donald Trump?
Well, he had a lot to say.
A lot.
But not much to back up some of
What
the
he
things
said.
that, yes, he said. He announced 2 emergencies, national energy emergency. And that's not a new story. It has always been an old one. His drill, baby drill. You're going to release more crude into the system. And that will definitely push prices down. He doesn't need to tell Saudi Arabia and OPEC to reduce price. Just pouring out that crude will push the price down. But what follows that is the next question. Then he also talks about the scam. He called it Green New Deal scam, which means he's kissing goodbye to all this Paris Agreement and what have you.
Yeah, already he is taking America out of it.
Yes,
and the
that's
World
right.
Health Organization.
And
World Health Organization has already responded to that particular action.
That's
of
right.
Trump.
Yeah, that's right. And then, so what that means is that he's actually, apart from that, proactively saying to other manufacturers to have, authorizing them to have a coal standby, so coal power system to back, but which means he's actually encouraging coal coming back in full force. So that's just another one. Of course, when he says out of the energy deal, the climate deal, and out for WHO, then who is next? How about WTO? Is it going to be next? World Bank, IMF, Security Council, NATO? So we want to know who is next, because they're all going to have repercussions, without a doubt. Because that is the area where you see his global view could well be an abstraction from the reality. And he didn't touch some of the realities. The reality that the half of the world are moving away from dollar control. And then you know that dollar accounts for 60% of all the borrowings denominated in dollar, 59% of the foreign reserves are in dollar, 88.4% of transactions, foreign exchange transactions are in dollar. All of these indices, even 25% of the GDP is dollar. So all of them are moving away. Those numbers are coming down fast. What would have taken the world 10 to 15 years to accomplish would really be accomplished in 4 years of his administration. But the rapidity of the decrease means that it could all happen within 4 years instead of 10 to 15 years that you could normally have taken. And that means that a departure from dollar means gold standard. You could see how the BRICS are ramping up gold production, and they all have, after Russia is the biggest, Russia and Australia are the biggest producers of gold anyway. So they're all heading out there. And these processes are irreversible. All this push are irreversible. And then the other thing is that he talked about deregulation. And I quite like that, because he actually points out how deregulation is actually accounting for the slow growth of Europe, and how that is a big complaint from many of the companies in Europe, and the advantage that America.
So but isn't it funny? He talks about, I'm not cutting, he talks about deregulation. We've known from time the world is supposed to enjoy cross-border sales, cross-border business. But then when you talk deregulation and you're saying tariffs, where does that then leave? Because he's starting America first. Where does that then leave? What has been the norm across the entire world, free trade, and where does that leave that?
Yeah, and he has his own point, though. I will tell you he has his point because he tries to explain why we should expect lower inflation in the American state, because there's a big question about that. When you begin to inflict higher tariffs on trading partners, it is America that will pay for those.
Definitely.
And secondly, he seems to underestimate Americans' resolve. The Americans don't buy made in American goods. They buy the goods from Canada, they buy from the cars from Japan, they don't buy made in American goods.
Because they're cheaper.
Because they're cheaper. And Americans are the richest in the world, but they are the most price conscious. They go for the lowest possible price. If you want an American to turn their vote against you, see it in their till, the basket, what they spend in Walmart and all that. That's where, and then the petrol. So he will bring the petrol price down by releasing more fuel. There's no doubt about that. But he also hopes that he could attract more businesses into the U.S. by pleading those deregulations.
Was he really pleading?
And he's showing good result on investment. If you see how he's sweet talking the Saudi prince to increase from $600 to $1 trillion, and he's got $500 billion coming from AI. He will get more, but he will get more in that area and in the area of defense than in other areas that in the productive capacity area. He's going to have issues there.
Yes, another issue is that Rutte of NATO, and even Zelensky in his speech talked about the fact that NATO Europe should indeed increase their spending on defense, and they should adopt an attitude of getting set for war because of what Russia has done, and it might not even end there and across the globe. But then the commentary is that talking about 5% of GDP, that's practically impossible for Europe to do.
We know that, without a doubt. But the thing is that Trump is more successful as a salesman of defense sector, but not that successful as a salesman for consumer products and technology manufactured. But he's for ICT, all that. Yes, he's very, very successful in that, but less successful in the other areas, which matter so much to domestic consumption. And then, of course, he talked about the fact that the war, he will bring an end to the war, but with no specific details.
On which of the wars?
Well, first of all, of course, he's claimed that he sorted out Israel.
Which is funny, really, because this has been going on over the years.
Yeah,
and so coming to say that because the Biden camp and your camp worked together when you were sworn in, you're taking credit for it.
That's right.
It's
But
the
of
same
course,
thing
he
you
also
did with talk.
Yeah, but TikTok, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, he had to reverse gear on TikTok.
I think it's about for
75 days now, 75 more days. But that is just a tip of the iceberg. Don't forget that he still has the outstanding issue with Huawei that he wouldn't even allow at all. He wanted them out completely. And the reason being that the technology they have, the American technology cannot even regulate that because they don't even understand that technology. So they may put a bug in their network, which will wake up one day and then cause mayhem across the American network. But the second part, of course, is about how there's less. Although he actually acknowledged that the temporary peace in Israel may not actually continue for that long. He's not sure. He actually mentioned that it's uncertain whether it will continue. Then, but in the case of Russia, again, we're not quite sure. Initially he was cast iron guarantee that as he's getting sworn in, something will happen.
And he was attacked on no plan, even on this, no plan whatsoever. Actually, Putin is saying that, I want to discuss with Trump, but it's going to be on my terms, on Russia's terms, and I'm not going to take the first step. Trump is going to take the first step, even though Trump is threatening sanctions.
Well, but Trump also...
And then Zelensky, too, is saying they are not giving up their territories. So one is watching to see who will give, what will happen concerning Russia and Ukraine. But the whole world really, he was right there when he said killing field. The whole world wants to see the likelihood of what is happening in Gaza, happen also in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, where so many people have died.
Yeah, that's right. But he also did mention, I think it was yesterday, that he was like speaking to the Russian public that the president is that the Russians are going to suffer more if we don't have, he has already hinting that.
Yeah,
but I think there is an
sanctions.
area that Russia president will be interested in. The fact that it's easier for him to talk to Trump on denuclearization, because that is an area that really annoyed Putin in the first place. It was before not getting traction on that, and then also he's not sure how far NATO wanted to advance so close to him, so he let loose. Now he's saying that he had a better relationship with him and better understanding with him on when it comes to nuclear non-proliferation and all that area. So very, 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 very interesting.
Of course, you know that China doesn't talk much, but they just do what they have to do on the ground.
Well, in the case of China,
he talked about unfair relationship, and then China he talked about China helping to stop the war, then the question of denuclearization, which we've discussed, but then he talked about China having a deficit advantage compared to America.
Absolutely. Now that is a ticking time bomb, because there are still some conflicts in the Southeast Asia. So we know that issue is not going to go away. And also the rogue nation, not Korea, is now heavily on the other side. It's no longer going to be able to have that kind of meeting and gestures that he had in the past. So it's now a more complex world. 4 years is a long time in global politics.
Yeah, it is.
He's going to have to learn that the thing has moved on. Absolutely. It's now a different ball game that he's going to face. But of course, there's another thing he raised, which is the abolishing diversity, the LGTBs, and all of that. Now, that is an internal affair of America. But what one good thing about America is that when he comes to the global stage and ruffles shoulders, there is more to do with containing the internal dynamics of America than having us. The world doesn't need to fight. So some of these fights will be fought for them inside America because of the pluralism of American politics.
Society.
That's right. So you will see a lot of fighting. And that will not happen until in 2 years' time.
It has already started, actually.
Yeah, see what happened. He's rolled out 200 executive orders. A lot of them is going to be passed by the Congress and the Senate because it controls both houses. But wait until 2 years. The momentum will continue to build. Until 2 years, you will now see the election, the midterm election. You will see what happens, because that's where Americans will put their feet down and release one of the houses to the opposition.
Actually, that's even started.
Yeah.
I mean, a coalition have come together after his speech to sue him concerning the citizens.
No, you will see more. There will be more suits than the 200.
Because I mean, the point is that it's a constitutional matter.
Absolutely.
And it's only Congress also is constitutional and Congress based. So he doesn't have the right to do that. So people have started going to court. Quite a coalition has
a lot of them will go to court. But that also brings the other issue about how would I describe that now? The emergency, sending
southern border emergency and energy emergency.
Now, apart from that, there is this issue of canal. That is still the Panama Canal. And then you've seen France warning that America should not send troops to Greenland, and that EU, no longer France, EU could respond to that. So that is beginning to draw a red line, before you know it. And that, what that means? It will affect relationship between the two, and it will all come down to NATO.
Of course, the president of Molino, the president of Panama, rebuked Trump. He said Panama Canal belongs to Panama, and we're not going to let it go at all. He made that very clear, in his rebuke in his reply to Trump when Trump was talking about Panama Canal. And what Trump claimed is not even right. He says China is managing it. It's not China. It's actually a company, Hutchison from Hong Kong. So sometimes what Trump says has to be fact checked, And then when he talks, I'm wondering, someone will help me understand when Trump talks about, because I've always known America as a land of free speech, Second Amendment, free speech. He says, no more stuff like misinformation and disinformation. I don't get that. So are people going to be allowed to roam the street misinforming people and disinforming people? Because disinformation and misinformation goes on a daily basis. So when you say free speech, fine, but when you say no more disinformation and misinformation, how does that come across to you?
Well, I'm not sure what he has up his sleeves in that, whether he's thinking of bringing any, or maybe whether there may be freedom of information. We don't know what is actually up his sleeves, what new regulation he's thinking he might be able to press, but I'm not sure. But the time has gone. If you've got the social media space, it's difficult to control that. You've got the politics. So we just have to see what exactly he has in mind. But I think one more thing is Canada responding in kind, to say they will respond to every inch.
Yeah, Chris Land has said it. Even the president said it when he talks about Canada becoming the 54th, is it 51st or 52nd
Canada is the biggest trading partner to America in terms of buying American goods before you bring in Europe.
Canada, Mexico.
Canada, Mexico, they are the biggest buyers of their goods. Not the Americans. Americans don't buy made in American goods. That's what I keep telling you. So all these equations that he's thinking, that, oh, if you don't come here to manufacture, when they come in and suck out your incentive, and then they produce the product, and they can't buy them at home, and Canada is now retaliating, and Mexico, they are not importing. Is it Europe that is importing American goods? So who else is buying American goods? They are very expensive.
And they're the
Standards
people that he's
high.
threatening with 25% tariff. Mexico and Canada.
Who is buying? Who's going to buy those goods? But people will take whatever incentive you give them. Of course, they will take it. And then you know also that it's going to reduce taxes, which is another incentive to the manufacturer. They will come in. They will enjoy those. But how are you going to sell all these products they are going to produce? Who is going to buy them when they are retaliating in tariffs? And you will not stop Americans from importing the things, except that they pay more tax, and then the population will still consume them. And your judgment will come 2 years down the line when they will now look at their pockets. And then it's going to be fighting inflation, because all those are inflation. You remove 1.2 million immigrants who are low-cost labor, remove them, fine. You have a right to do that, but you're going to see the price, how it's going to affect the input price of the products are going to go up.
Because of the cost of labor.
It's going to go up. Then you are removing you're reducing the tariff substantially, reducing the taxes substantially. You are going to borrow, and you are increasing spending to 5% of GDP on defense. You're going to have to borrow money. You will borrow. And then when you borrow, there's a cost of borrowing. And then where are you going to borrow from? Some of the countries you would borrow from, like China, are going to be less
responsive.
Likely.
All right.
So we're going to see some difficult times. So I don't know if 100 of those 200 EOs are going to be effective. There will be pushback. There will be pullbacks. Yeah, there will be pushbacks.
Of course, some of them are going to be fought. Already they're fighting some of them in court. So we'll see how that plays out. Thank you so much, Prof. Ken Ife there.
Thank you.
Your observations on Trump's first public outing at Davos, speaking to the about 3,000 political leaders all over the world gathered at Davos, Switzerland, and of course business leaders. Of course, you saw them there asking him questions on how he will relate with them concerning business in America.